Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider from Kates-Boylston. Conversations worth having about death care and end-of-life care. We have a great show for you this week. We try to have a great show every week. I think we often succeed. We're speaking with Tom Nondorf, who is the editor of American Cemetery and Cremation magazine. He joins us quarterly, sometimes a little more, to talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the magazine that we lovingly refer to as SEM. And this is no exception. This is October, and October is a great month for cemeteries, and not just because of any of the holidays, but also because the weather is gorgeous, but we'll get into all of that. I would like to remind you to please stay on until after the credits for a little bit of insight into today's conversation, but right now we're just going to get into this conversation with Tom after these messages from our friends at Matthews.
For more than 20 years, Matthews Aurora Funeral Solutions has been providing innovative technology to support funeral professionals and their families. Their Arranger presentation system makes showcasing service and merchandise options simple. Family Connections technology enables families to participate in arrangement planning from the comfort of home. And the Advisor system combines case management and interactive planning, all in one place. Simplify the arrangement process with technology designed for you. Visit MatthewsAurora.com for a free demo or call 1-800-457-111 today. That's MatthewsAurora.com or 1-800-457-1111. Call today.
So we're speaking now, it is the end of September, and you're kind of fresh back from the Catholic Cemeteries Convention. And it made me think that it would be fun to at least start off this conversation talking about some of the events that you've gone to, some of the events that you've heard about, and the, of course, relation to having like events in a cemetery, because, you know, that's something that's going to be happening a lot over the next couple of weeks as well. So let's start with Catholic cemeteries and work our way back from there. You're freshly back. What were your observations?
Hey, Tony, Catholic Cemetery Conference event happened in Anaheim. My observations were it was really fun. You know, for me to go to a one of these events, I say go to ICCFA, go to the Cremation Association of North America's event. They're great, but they're not always cemetery based.
Right.
And I love things about cremation, don't get me wrong, but to get in a place where it's all cemetery all the time, because so much of what we do, even at Kates-Boylston, as you know, it's a lot of American Funeral Director. And, there's a lot more air pumped in that direction for a lot of good reasons. Cemeteries, though, are meaningful. They're, I think, in a pivotal spot. I guess it's pivotable, but what I meant is pivotal spot. That they're on the precipice of making some interesting choices, let's say.
I think pivotable is enviable and pivotal. Let's leave it.
Okay. I don't know that every cemetery would say they're in an enviable spot. Well, some are. Long story short, it's great being in a place where cemeteries were the headliner, and the Catholic Cemetery Conference put together a great thing. And there was so many like granite people, monument people, just cemetery people, a lot of the dioceses, archdioceses across the U.S. and Canada. So it was a really fun place for me to be, because I find one of the hardest things about my job as editor of American Cemetery and Cremation magazine is getting cemeterians to reach out, tell their stories. So for me, it's just a great place to get stories, learn about people. And a big part of it is all the vendors who show up there. They're very cemetery focused, and it's good to get their stories too.
Did you have any big takeaways? Anything that you want to share? I know you've got some stories you're working on, but if there's something you want to talk about now that you feel needs shouting out?
Oh, yeah, Tony. I mean, one thing that was really cool was I went to one of the sessions by a gentleman named Rene Negrete, who is the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Inglewood Park Cemetery there in California. And he was talking about return on investment, what we call ROI, for events and marketing of events for cemeteries. So I sat there ready to watch it, and he is talking about 4 different case studies of events. And the first one was a night of jazz music on their property. Because, okay, this is a very lucky location, or a fortunate location, let's say. Etta James is buried there, at last. Chet Baker, the great trumpet player. Ray Charles. Who doesn't know Ray Charles? So to me, these are people who, even young people, are going to know some of these tracks from hearing them on TikTok. At last is still played at just about every wedding, right?
Right.
My Funny Valentine by Chet Baker. Kids know this stuff. Ray Charles. So, he's playing the videos of their marketing for it, and we're watching and we're like, okay, wow, this is a home run. Let's hear how they put it together. And then he shows the numbers on it, and it was basically a disaster. Nobody came to the thing.
Oh, no.
It was one of these things where you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be this. He was leading with the success story, but he kind of pulled the rug out from under us. His term he used was negative 100% return on investment. They got no leads from it, very poor attendance. And it was a little bit of a wake-up call in terms of how they were viewing their constituency, the demographic around the cemetery. The people just weren't that interested in those flavors of jazz or whatever. It didn't work. And they'd had jazz stuff before, but this thing, fell on its face, and it was interesting to me because in the pages of American Cemetery, I'm proselytizing all the time, and you do as well, and everyone we talk to too, who work at cemeteries and who market. Hey, events are one way forward. It woke me up to the fact that it's not enough to just plan events. There really has to be some thinking going into your community, into studying the people around your cemetery and what they might actually be interested in and open to. So that was an interesting thing. And I love that he did that. He kind of pulled us in, and well, this sounds great on paper, right? I can sit here and I would have told, 100 people, wow, that's going to be a success. You should do something like this. Then he gives the number that says this didn't work for us. That same night might have worked in New York, might have worked in Brooklyn, might have worked in at other cemeteries around the country. It didn't for them. So you got to find out what works for you. It was very interesting to me. They're also, they have the big Dia de los Muertos event. That's their crown jewel. And, so that was the other end of their case studies. Huge success. Right. And yet he said at the beginning, it was difficult. People at first were like, why are people dressed up as skeletons running around in the cemetery? Why are you having craft tables and stuff selling little dead people? It freaks some people out until they were educated on it. So a lot of it is articulating to your demographic around your cemetery what you're doing too. You have to be communicative about it. Now, and he gave a lot of credit to the recent Disney movie. I forget the name of it.
Yeah, the grandpa's dead.
Yeah, a huge element about Dia de los Muertos. It's opened up a lot of people's minds to it. But I think in a way, the culture at large has more acceptance of it. And you have a lot of cemeteries running that type of event. But 10 years on or whatever, it's their hugest success. So it was just interesting for me to see from the point of view of Inglewood Park Cemetery, which is a cemetery, like I said, very fortunate. A lot of famous people there, a lot of opportunities there for marketing. But, they have their challenges, and you really got to be sharp in terms of the choices you make.
For those of you yelling at your desktop set or wherever you're listening, the film's Coco.
Coco, yes, golly. I was thinking, because there was another one, Leo or something that was out recently.
And there was a death one called Soul. That's why I was.
Soul, right. And they're all like 4-letter word names.
It's very easy to confuse. Those people at Disney, they've got no handle on marketing whatsoever.
Lilo,
So one of the things that I actually reported on that kind of touches this is there was a cemetery in Easton Pennsylvania, talking about how they have to up their event game. And one of the things that I don't know if they brought it out on purpose or if you brought it out by talking about what you were just talking about, but they're starting smaller and just how do you build foot traffic? Like get the people in the neighborhood used to coming there, get more neighborhood or not too far away volunteers who are going to be able to spread the word and coming there. And increasingly, when you get people to, if people are comfortable coming to the cemetery, then they'll be more comfortable bringing people to a cemetery event.
I've found that to be totally true. Before I ever imagined that I would be writing and editing stories about cemeteries. I lived near Greenwood in Brooklyn. I'm sure I've told this story before, but like I lived 7 blocks from it. I didn't know you could go inside it.
Right.
And when I talked to Richard Moylan, recently retired president, he said that's the way they wanted it. They didn't want people to think they could go inside. They were happy. You know, there was a long time with a lot of cemeteries where they were happy that people thought you shouldn't go hang out in a cemetery. And then I saw a television special with David Hartman wandering around Brooklyn and showing the inside of the cemetery and how historic and amazing it was. I was like, I live this close to this and I didn't even know you could just walk in. And you can, and it was amazing. And, you know, people need to know, a lot of people still need to know that, hey, it's okay. Not every place, but in so many cemeteries, they want people in for the reason that you mentioned. You'll eventually bring other people in and show people the value of a cemetery.
Now, I stumbled across, I guess, a metaphor, which is the United States car manufacturers complaining that the problem with American car sales was that people didn't want fins anymore, you know, and just there was a story that I was reporting on where there was a funeral director who had said that people stopped going to funerals because they can't throw dirt on the grave or whatever at the end of the cemetery, that people don't feel connected to burial anymore. And I just thought it was a great example of completely missing the point of why people aren't coming to burials anymore. You know, it's like they're tired of they won't listen and do what they're told, and I don't know why. And the not listen and do what you're told is the why. And I think people increasingly are catching on to that now, as you said, with, for example, realizing that it's better to have people feel comfortable in the cemetery than to have people afraid of coming in for disturbing any kind of, you know, ritualistic stuff.
Was that USA Today piece?
Yeah.
You wrote, yeah. Yes, that was ridiculous because, you know, it comes down to people have an idea of a tradition in their mind and they want other people to respect that tradition and feel it too. But, you know, you can't make somebody feel the same tradition that you're excited about. So it's not enough for you to say, you should want this tradition as well. You know, and that's not enough in death care at large right now to talk about tradition and guilt somebody into wanting something when they have no sense of it. They never were plugged into that at all because they're younger or whatever reason.
Did you have any positive takeaways from the events? Like what was the upside, the hope in events?
Well, it was all positive. You know, it was interesting that he led with that event that didn't succeed, but you know, the Dia de los Muertos that they do is a huge success. Another huge success they had there, which you might not expect, is when the cemetery just opened a new area, a new garden in their cemetery and advertised that for people to come out. That was massive for them. They had a lot of success. So if you're doing something, you have a new columbarium, you have a new garden for spreading cremated remains or just a new area of your cemetery, let people know they want to just come and see. And what it does is show people, hey, this place is alive and well. People might not have realized because people hear different things about cemeteries or a particular cemetery. They think, oh, whoa, they're still doing new things in here. And that's exciting for people. The other valuable thing about that Rene Negrete said at Inglewood Park, but I've heard this before, and it reinforced something that I'd preach a little bit, which is that, you know, it's not always about the straight line, top line ROI.
Right.
Awareness is very important. And what you mentioned, getting people just feeling comfortable in the location. There's a non-monetary value you can put on that. You know, the jazz thing was sad because, you know, it cost them a lot of money to put that on. So, and people didn't come. So people didn't enjoy the music, but anything else that gets people out to your place in numbers is a net positive, unless they see something negative when they're there. But assuming that everything is great when you're there, it's a great way to get people to think about taking a tour, for the purpose of their future, of pre-planning, or just even thinking about pre-planning at all. I mean, there's a lot of positivity, to having events if you do it right. But if you're doing events where you're really wanting to attract a lot of people, just make sure you're touching base with your community and seeing that it's something they might be interested in at all.
Kates-Boylston has announced the speakers for its upcoming one-day event, Advances in Funeral Innovations, to be held at the Westin Southfield Detroit Marriott in Detroit, Michigan. Danielle Burmeister, Vice President of Marketing Communications, Homesteaders Life Company, will be speaking on maximizing team performance through accountability and alignment. Will Bischoff, Senior VP, Strategic Markets for Homesteaders Life Company, will present the Funeral Finance Roadmap, Strategies to Fund What's Next. Stephanie Cassanier-Dunn, Chief SBA Revenue Officer, Phoenix SBA, a community bank share company, will present the Silver Tsunami, the coming wave of business transitions. Matt Van Drimmelen, owner and founder of Full Circle Aftercare, will present Getting ROI Out of Aftercare at Your Funeral Home, Turning Compassion into Long-Term Value. Tom Cole and Nathan Hurst, Vice President of Sales and National Sales Manager for Federal Eagle, will present Benefits from Funeral Car Innovation. Scott Jensen, co-founder, First Call Marketing, will present How to Be the Funeral Home ChatGPT Recommends. Register at the links below or visit events.katesboylston.com for more information. It was interesting. It's interesting that you said the columbarium thing, because another story that I shared with you, I think this week, is that they're becoming more popular in Japan. Columbarium. Columbaria?
Columbaria, I guess, is the plural. But we don't stand on ceremony,
People don't want to be out in the sun anymore. And apparently the Japanese spend more time at these gardens where they would have their urns kind of displayed, and they're moving inside. And it was like a climate change story where people just they wanted to be able to come and spend time, but they didn't want to have to be in the sun to do it. And so there was this big shift toward columbarium in Japan. And it was reported on, I guess, last week or the week before. Late September, I guess. I always forget how far ahead we record these.
Yes, well, shakeups like that are interesting, and they're scary for some people who love tradition and want everyone to love tradition, but different things are exciting. I did for October, our October issue, which obviously will be coming out in a few days. I had fun. I said, I just want to have a calendar where we have a different event that somebody's doing on every day of October, because October is a good event month for the places that lean into the spooky historic side.
And also just the weather is, my birthday's in October, so it's always been my favorite month, but the weather is impeccable in October. Like,
it's a great time.
You might get some rain, but it's always going to be comfortable.
If you have trees, you got your fall foliage going on, perhaps. You've got just a host of different events. And then it has, I don't know whether this was the best idea or who did it, but you have Visit a Cemetery Day happens at the end of the month, when theoretically people might already be visiting cemeteries around Halloween. But anything that gets people in, we have Visit a Cemetery Month. There's all this stuff happening in October. And I'm just going to give you a list of some of the things I found, starting with Greenwood again. There's Paula Prestini, Houses of the Zodiac. It's music and dance inside the catacombs, which is this tunnel down there. Candlelight tours at the old city cemetery in Lynchburg, Virginia. The Scandals and Scoundrels tour in Elmwood Cemetery, Memphis, Tennessee. Skeletons in the Closet tour at Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis. You got Halloween pet portraits at Congressional in D.C., midnight moonlight cemetery tours. We got fall tree walks, cemetery after dark lantern tour, True Tales from the Tombs, literary figures of Cave Hill in Louisville. There's a monthly memorial mass, but October sale going on at Evergreen Memorial Cemetery. They're using it to sell space. So just to list a few ideas, the point is, I think what should be fun also enlivening for your staff is it really taps into people's creativity.
And also their imagination. And I think, we've gone over it before, but that's the key, capturing people's imagination about what a cemetery can be and how they can have. It's so funny. I'm jealous now only because all the cemeteries by me are very, very, very plain. Big lawns, mostly churches, but they're just big lawns with headstones in them. There's not a lot of old trees. There's not water features or any of the quote kind of cool stuff that you'd expect in the bulk of the cemeteries. But we also have a lot of, I live in, the kind of the rural South. So there's a lot of family cemeteries, and those are always cool. When you're walking along and you see like just 4 headstones, up on a hill.
If you remember, Jody Dupree with SCI talking to us about this, in terms of cemetery, taking people on the business side tours of your place. But Ashlyn Rickard Werner is someone we've talked to recently. She's going to be featured in October, and she's going to be writing as well exactly on this topic because she's doing a comprehensive survey herself. And remind me to talk also about a survey that we're doing. But Ashlyn works for Plotbox, but on the side she's dedicated herself to she's run cemeteries in Providence, Rhode Island stuff, but she's dedicated to learning about cemeteries. And what we talk about when we talk about learning your demographic and setting up events, she's another person who's out there preaching events, and she has a cemetery. She'll be surveyed. She'll have the results coming in the next month or so. And the thing is, we talk, and Jody Dupree talked about this a lot. Not every cemetery, like the ones near you, has
something worth seeing. You have to drum it up.
Right. There's not maybe the murdered guy that everyone knows about. There's not the Hollywood star who inexplicably is buried there. Although you could take a short drive and be at a cenotaph for Robert Mitchum if you're ever interested. Not far from your house there, and it's in Maryland. You would be close to his cenotaph in southern Delaware.
So next week, I'm interviewing the guy that wrote the definitive book on Robert Mitchum on the Eastern Shore. That's crazy.
That is wild. So, but what Ashlyn and Joey Dupree said is, Ashlyn's going to be writing and talking specifically about this, which is, hey, how do you find the stories if you don't think that there's are interesting things at your cemetery? And it's not always easy. It's not, some cemeteries are more blessed. Not everybody's Inglewood Park, but there are stories there because we all know this because we all have a story, right? If you were to take me around to the graves of your family, whoever's buried in your family, you would probably have a good time telling me interesting tales. Now, she says there's ways to go online and research, and you will find something that you can make interesting and make people excited to learn about in your cemetery, no matter where.
It's really just a question of the work. I wish they'd plant a tree though at some of the ones near me. It's sometimes I'm like, would it kill you? Throw off a tree, something, so you don't have to. It's not like back when I thought that I could, get down to a normal human person's weight. I was walking in cemeteries, and it was always like, how like almost like when you were a kid and running around barefoot. Like, how far is it between here and the next patch of shade, and will I make it, or will I die trying?
Yeah. And speaking of trees and why some places don't have them, I was talking with Greg Carbone of Bartlett Trees and Tree Care, because we do in November, we usually have our grounds maintenance,
right?
And for places that have trees, one thing interesting, we were talking, and he said to me, something about, always making sure you're looking up if you're out. And I said, you must view the world differently than us commoners, because you're someone who cares for trees out at places. He said, yeah, I was out with my son at an event at an ice cream social or something, and everybody was having a good time. And I was looking up and I said, man, we shouldn't be here. This is not safe. He looks around, sees everybody having a good time in a location, but because he knows trees, he saw only the danger around him. And I thought, that's interesting. That's a big article we have coming up in November, is just how to make sure that you, especially again, Tony, we're talking about events, with cemeteries holding more events, make sure you inventory your property. Make sure you or somebody who knows this stuff goes around that property and says, hey, here's an area. If people are going to be gathering a lot here, you might want to check these trees out. You might want to limb this. take these branches here because this is a little dangerous. So that's another interesting thing we have coming up.
Speaking of interesting things you have coming up, and I don't want to serve you this on too large a platter, but I do want to make sure we tick off all of our boxes. I would like to talk about the missing cemeteries, if you have a minute to tell me about that feature that's coming up.
Oh,
Is that
yeah.
in October?
We have a writer, Tony Poglia, lives in Pennsylvania. He was out driving and saw a few signs. It takes a writer sometimes to notice this stuff on a deeper level, but, he saw signs that said, former home of Ashokan, former home of this town. And he's like, what does that mean, former home? But at some point, they had to put up the signs because a reservoir was put in the Ashokan Reservoir in Pennsylvania. And there were all these towns, obviously including cemeteries. And he was able to track down where the cemeteries were moved to and find some of the moved graves. Some of them did not get moved. And that's an interesting thing. And that led me to write a piece because it all made me think of the movie Deliverance. There's a big part of that movie is these guys are whitewater rafting in Georgia. And, at one point, I think it's Burt Reynolds says, this is all going to be filled in by a lake that they're damming this up. So this is all a dying area. And, if we let this body buried, you can't be buried under anymore. You can't be buried any more than this, basically. Underneath a lake on top of a river that doesn't exist, where whole towns are underwater. And that's real stuff. I mean, Lake Lanier in Georgia was famously just has towns, a racetrack underneath it. But some of these cemeteries were moved. What I found out too is that, there's cemeteries near where Deliverance was filmed, but in South Carolina, just over the border, that you can go underwater and see the headstones are still there. So incredible stuff. And that all comes from Tony's research on those moved places. So that's a very interesting story and a little bit unnerving, but good stuff for October, I thought.
I guess one of the things that gets these things covered up is nobody was there to protest, right? There's like the last person had not visited the cemetery for a very long time. So, it was just something that could be done. Although the headstones underneath the water really captures the imagination, doesn't it?
Sure. We had that image that a photographer in Pennsylvania and also in Philly, there's the famous headstones that were just dumped into the Delaware River. And, there's footage and photos of those too. I mean, you like to think we're more enlightened in how we treat these things, but there is still a ton. I know in Indianapolis, they're digging up a cemetery, digging for a highway, but they found a cemetery there. So every day they're finding new things under there. So it's wild to think. Remember the story we had last year about stadiums that were built? And
right.
Stadiums are built on top of cemeteries because that's where the land was cheap and nobody was going to complain about it. Maybe less fortunate people buried there. So incredible.
And before I let you go, because we are kind of coming up toward the end, I do want to talk about your survey and some of the other things you have going on in SEM for November.
Yes. Kates-Boylston Cemetery Survey will be in October. It'll be something you can do in the magazine, or preferably for you. It's probably easier for our readers and stuff to do it online and send it, but we do make it available in the magazine as well this year. It's just to find out who our readers are, what kind of cemeteries, what size, who's running these places. It helps us stay in touch and know who we're talking to. If I'm talking about events and making sure your constituency out there, your demographic, that's a big part of what we want. So it's really helpful for us, and it's helpful for you too. And the first 100 people who complete the survey will get a gift card. So definitely keep an eye out for that. In November, I'm just going to help you out by rushing you through this. But in November, we will have our ACE Award. That's American Cemetery Excellence Award. Runners up will be in our November issue. We had, Tony, the most applications we've ever had this year. And it was really wild and tough decisions to make. But we have our runners up coming in November. That will lead up to December. The cover of that will be our winner of our American Cemetery Excellence Award for 2026. I'm sorry. I just advanced this a year, didn't I? 2025.
That's okay. 2025, nothing really happened worth noting anyway. I do want to just go back a little bit and say that we will put a link to the survey in the show notes here. So if you go to the show notes wherever you're listening and click on them, you'll be able to see a link to the survey. I'm excited for the notion of at least one person, maybe even if it's not me. Maybe I'll bring one to the cemetery around the corner. I'll tell them to plant a tree, and then I'll have them fill out the paper one, because I think it was kind of cool that you decided that you wanted to have a paper survey for people to fill out and send back.
You know, we talk about the precipice and the future and all this in the world of cemeteries, but there are still people who, you know, one of the questions is on there is, you know, how do you keep your records? And you and I have talked about this. We thought it was a little bit of a myth. Is there really anybody out there who still only has paper records, you know? But you and I know also that there are.
Yes.
Even some of I know that one of our runners up this year only recently transferred out of paper records because they were basically on the verge of insolvency, and they had to say, let's modernize. So, you know, there are people who, and listen, there's nothing wrong with cutting out coupons and cutting out a survey and sending it to us. If you monkey around with online, which can be a pain in the butt, but, you know, if you can, online is faster and it's easier, and it's not going to cost you a stamp, but it will be available to you in October. So check it out, at least even if you want to just go over the questions before you look at the online version.
Very cool. And that kind of brings us up to it. Although, I mean, you know, we can make this as long as we want. So is there something you wanted to get to that I didn't get to? Because we still have time to do it.
Oh, wow. I thought we did a pretty good job covering everything, but I do want to thank the folks at the Catholic Cemetery Conference because, again, that for me, and I should, since I haven't talked to you prior, the Cana event in Phoenix was magnificent. Those were two great times for me in terms of meeting companies that are cemetery adjacent, who have stories to tell, and cremation adjacent. And I know that, for instance, we got a guy from Harbison Walker to talk about cremation equipment that I didn't really know anything about, and a lot of people don't know about because the refractory is kind of deep inside your cremation equipment. So that was interesting to hear about. And I think you've talked to him as well. And, you know, there's a lot of interesting things coming in our pages. October is exciting because it's a month, like you said, or we said, people are in cemeteries a lot. So now it's kind of your chance to shine as a cemetery. And if you're not doing something interesting, there's a lot of ideas you can steal and make your own out there.
Absolutely. And people are flattered by that. I'm actually working on a feature now. Somebody's doing one of those before I die events. And they bought the rights to do it. And I thought it was cool to say, yes, you did something cool and I want to do that cool thing too. And I'm not too cool to say, hey, yeah, your idea worked. I'm going to see if it'll work for me.
The other thing I want to say to you, Tony, is go to that cemetery near you and find someone to talk to and say, hey, can I plant a tree here? They may take you up on that. They may love it.
It'll be a fig tree. That's my thing. I'm the Johnny Appleseed of figs down here.
Oh, yeah. I still need you to tell me how to harvest my figs. I'm clueless, and the birds get them before I ever can.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we're going to call that a night, and we will check in with you guys next time. This is the second time in a row that I cut Tom off before he finished thanking me for having him, but I just wanted you guys to know that he did. Now we're going to listen to this message from our friends at Matthews, and if you stay, I'll have something special for you on the next side of the ad. Kates-Boylston has announced the speakers for its upcoming one-day event, Advances in Funeral Innovations, to be held at the Westin Southfield Detroit Marriott in Detroit, Michigan. Danielle Burmeister, Vice President of Marketing Communications, Homesteaders Life Company, will be speaking on maximizing team performance through accountability and alignment. Will Bischoff, Senior VP, Strategic Markets for Homesteaders Life Company, will present the Funeral Finance Roadmap, Strategies to Fund What's Next. Stephanie Castanier-Dunn, Chief SBA Revenue Officer, Phoenix SBA, a community bank share company, will present The Silver Tsunami, the coming wave of business transitions. Matt Van Drimmelen, owner and founder of Full Circle Aftercare, will present Getting ROI Out of Aftercare at Your Funeral Home, Turning Compassion into Long-Term Value. Tom Cole and Nathan Hurst, Vice President of Sales and National Sales Manager for Federal Eagle, will present Benefits from Funeral Car Innovation. Scott Jensen, co-founder, First Call Marketing, will present How to Be the Funeral Home ChatGPT Recommends. Register at the links below or visit events.katesboylston.com for more information. So for those of you who are kind enough to hang around, I would like to give you $50 off of your next attendance at a Kates-Boylston event. We have one in November, we have one in December, and for our listeners, the discount code is always the same. It is FSI50. That is F like funeral, S like service, I like insider 50 for $50 off your registration fee. Links to all of our events and registrations are in the show notes. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now. If you go to the show notes, you can click on the button that says follow, and that will give you the opportunity to subscribe to this podcast in whatever podcatcher you prefer. If you would like to send some feedback, you can do so by sending an email to russo@kbpublications.com. That is the best way to get in touch with me, and I would be happy to take any of your emails under consideration. But that'll do it for this week. We will check in with you next time.